All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second Praxis prep session. This one is going to be us looking at the Teaching Reading Praxis 5206. This is for the reading teacher praxis. However, there is some to significant overlap with some of the other praxis exams. So some of this material will not necessarily be specific to your exam, as we were talking about before we started recording with a couple of you, but there's going to be overlap, and I'm happy to explore some of the specific tests like the literacy specialist and some of the other ones to help you kind of compare contrast a little bit. My name is Kirsten Pomerantz. I'm an instructor here at the University of Idaho, and I'm very excited to work with all of you to start building more of kind of your confidence and just some ideas about how you might prepare for the praxis exam. We have a couple students with us, and do feel free to either put in the chat any questions as they come up, or raise your hand and ask questions, especially if you've kind of seen this test before and know as we're walking through some of this, like, oh yeah, this is a thing I wanted to know a little bit more about. I'll do my best to answer what I can, and we'll certainly do homework if there's things that I need to pursue and get back to you all. For those of you that are watching this as a recording, do know that I am more than happy to work with you individually to answer questions. You can reach me by email, kpomerantz@uidaho.edu. And yeah. All right. So the thing I wanted to start with, this was buried deep in my slides, but I know that for anybody that's going to be kind of looking through the slide deck, of course, you're looking for maybe what is in these slides, but I do think that two of your best places to go to just kind of get comfortable with and aware of what is expected for you on the ETS Praxis exam is, of course, the ETS website itself. That should be your central place to check. If you've taken any of these exams before, you recognize that the language that is used, the way that the questions are asked and the way the answers are phrased is not totally unique, but a little bit specialized, right? A little bit, some of what we need to get used to in order to be successful on these tests is just, how do they ask the questions? And so looking through the ETS materials themselves, looking at their old exams that they have released for us to look at, is one of our best places to go. Once you start going to other study guides, they are absolutely helpful for lots of reasons, but they might change just a little bit of their grammar, of their syntax, of their word choice, enough that can sometimes be a little bit of a distractor or a point of confusion as you're looking at really feeling prepared for this test. The other resource that I discovered a few weeks ago, thanks to a student who had been prepping for her exam, the 5206, is Kathleen Jasper. And you can see that I've got 4 different links down here to different Kathleen Jasper videos, as well as her website. She does have materials that you pay for, but she has a lot of free resources, and that's one of my gauges for whether or not I want to recommend materials to you all. Is I would want to know, and that there's enough material to be able to access for free, that it's not just like somebody's trying to sell a way to get by. She does have great material that you do pay for, but she has a lot of great videos that you don't pay for. So this link is to her website, Kathleen Jasper's website. The link on the left is specifically about the constructed response, and you can see that it's 5205. She says early in the video, kind of what I just said, that some of these, the reading teacher type exams are very similar to one another. And so in terms of how do we construct a response, what kinds of questions, how do they pose the questions, are very universal. And so there's things that are going to be able to apply across a bunch of different specific exams. Another video that I think is very helpful and makes very explicit something that I hadn't thought too deeply about before kind of digging into this is she has a video about the good words and bad words, so that your little feelers, your spidey senses will become more alert to if certain things, certain ways that the ETS phrases questions or answers that let you know this is like probably going to be a really good answer, or this is probably not the right answer, to help you in your process of elimination, which is one of our attacks that we need to do as we're looking at navigating the test. And then this one on the right, oh, I just muted myself. There we go, is an hour specifically also about the reading teacher exam. I'm hoping that I think these are 2 different links. I need to check back. I always doubt myself when I've put these together that I've been thorough enough, because sometimes I haven't. So I'll check and make sure. But I'm pretty sure that these are actually 2 different instances of ways that she's talking about this exam. All right, no, she's going to talk. There we go. Okay. So overview. These materials for the next, pretty much all the slides. I took the Praxis study companion and I pulled it apart and exploded it out with what I think are the most important operational details from the study companion, because like I said, I firmly believe that our best place to go is what does ETS say and how do they say it? Other things are of course going to be very useful, but this needs to be our landing pad because this is their contract with us about what they're asking of us. So the test itself is 150 minutes. There are 90 selected response questions, that's multiple choice questions, and 3 constructed response questions. I believe that in the constructed response prompts, they suggest that each prompt should take you about 10 minutes to complete. So even if it took you twice that much, right? So if it took you 20 minutes times 3, you have 20, 40, 60 minutes that you're working on your constructed response, you still have about a minute per question on the selected response, which means it's fast, right? If reading speed and that kind of fluidity of reading is one of your struggles, then this is one of those places where you want to be very strategic. Remembering that when you're trying to do process of elimination and you're trying to get to the one or two best answers, you're always better off selecting something than skipping and moving on, because it never gets counted against you for guessing. And at worst, you have a 1 in 4 chance of getting it correct with a guess. Someplace in the materials I've been reviewing and different people I've read over the years suggest different things. The most recent thing I saw was if you really can't eliminate down to 1, 2, or maybe even 3 answers, pick C. I think a consistent guessed response is still going to be better than no response at all. But ideally, you can get down to 1 or 2, ideally the 1, right? But even 2, where you're having to kind of weigh a little bit. Okay, so the format, the selected response questions account for approximately 75% of your total test score. The constructed response questions, those 3 short answer questions, are approximately 25% of your score. And as you can see below, they have a further breakdown then of the content categories. We have our phonological and phonemic awareness, including emergent literacy, which is about 13 questions and about 11% of the exam. And then phonics and decoding, about 16 questions and about 14% of the exam. So between phonemic awareness and phonics, we're looking at about a quarter of the exam. And then fluency and vocabulary, 16%. Comprehension of literary and informational text is at 23%. So as a chunk, other than the constructed response, feeling comfortable with comprehension of literary and informational text is going to be one of the larger standalone chunks of material. But you can see that they do kind of split fairly evenly if we put phonics and phonemic awareness together and fluency, vocabulary, and writing together. And then, of course, writing itself. Writing is 11%, and that's questions about the writing task. What is it to teach writing? And then finally, the assessment and instructional decision-making, which is 25% of the test. Before I go too much and further with this, if you're taking the Praxis, the ETS Praxis exam, practice exam, there we go. If you're taking the practice exam, you do have the chance to be able to look at the breakdown of your scores. And you may have done this already, but if you haven't, when you've signed up to take the test, you are able to take a free version of one of their old tests, and they will automatically score it for you. You don't get any response from them if you try a constructed response. That would be something where this former English teacher would love to get to look at your practice constructed responses and help deconstruct them with you. If you want me to do that, I would love to get to kind of dig into those with you. But when you're taking that practice exam, look at the breakdown of the percentages. This is how I spent my spring break. I went ahead and took this practice exam specifically so that I could look at where are my strengths and where are my relative levels of weakness. And fortunately, again, as a former high school English teacher, my strongest point was section 4, the comprehension of literary and informational text, which makes sense based on the fact that this is what I've taught for the last few years. That matches what I know to be my skill set. And what I know that I need to work on is I need to dig more deeply into the phonological and phonemic awareness and emergent literacy, which also is not surprising. So it confirms what I know, what I assume about my skill set, and allows me to think about where would I target development. I don't want to target further development on the thing that I'm fairly strong on. I want to look at the thing that I'm somewhat weak on and look for more materials to help me build on those. Okay, so then they have a few quick tips about what to do and remember. One is, of course, don't be intimidated by the words that you may not understand, even if you feel like these are words that you should know. Our shoulds often get in our own way. It might be easy, they say, to be thrown by words like recursive or inferential. Read carefully to understand the question and look for an answer that fits. An outline is something you're probably familiar with and expect to teach to your students. So slow down and use what you do know, right? More than anything else, I know if you're taking these tests a few times, you know, there's some panic that starts to set in. So breathe deeply, take care of yourselves. You're going to be able to do this no matter what. You're going to get through this. So watch out, they say, for selected response questions containing not, least, or except. Know yourself as a test taker and know if you tend to skip through the prompt part, that you want to read carefully enough to recognize that that sometimes they're asking for all of these are true except one of them, right? And so you might actually know the correct answer, but by missing that except, you might pick one of the ones that is the correct answer, but they want the not correct answer, if that makes sense, right? And then how to approach questions about graphs, tables, or reading passages. So of course, graphs and tables will not most likely be part of this multiple choice part, but the reading passages, absolutely, right? So when answering questions about the reading passages, provide only the information that the questions ask for. In the case of a map or graph, you might want to read the questions first and then look at the map or graph so that you know what you're focusing in on. In the case of a long reading passage, you might want to go ahead and read the passage first, noting places that you think are important, and then answer the questions, right? Again, the important thing is to be sure you answer the questions as they refer to the material presented. So read the question carefully. We will talk about constructed response towards the end of this. We're going to kind of walk through what the content is. We're going to walk through some sample questions and answers, and then we're going to look at the reading passages, the prompts, and I have a writing structure to suggest for you as a way to how to organize your responses. All right, and how to approach unfamiliar formats. New question formats are developed from time to time to find new ways of assessing knowledge. Tests may include audio and video components, such as a movie clip or an animation, instead of a map or a reading passage. This is part of their generic information. I do not think that this is likely to apply to the reading specialist, the teaching reading exams, but they might. Right? Other tests may allow you to zoom in on details in a graphic or a picture. Tests may also include interactive questions. These questions take advantage of technology to assess knowledge and skills in ways that standard selected response questions cannot. If you see a format you are not familiar with, read those directions carefully. The directions always give clear instructions on how you are expected to respond. And then they say, of course, and this is hard to keep in mind because I often feel like I'm being tricked by questions sometimes, right? Don't make the questions more difficult than they are. Read them at their surface, their face value. Don't read for hidden meanings or tricks. There are no tricks in the praxis tests. They are intended to be serious, straightforward tests of your knowledge. I'm saying that because a couple of the questions when I did the practice test, I just felt like, oh, what are they getting at? And so it's hard sometimes to figure out where to read and not overread those questions. All right, and then understanding constructed response questions. So again, we're touching on this, and then I'll come back to this at the end, towards the end. Constructed response questions require you to demonstrate your knowledge in a subject area by creating your own response to particular topics. Essays and short answer questions are types of constructed response questions. So for an example, an essay question might present you with a topic and ask you to discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the opinion stated. And then it continues on with a couple examples of how you what you might see. But this is important for us. You must support your position or your example with specific reasons and examples from your own experience, observations, or reading. And in our case, what we know or believe we know about reading instruction. And that's where perhaps having a little bit of a framework structure might help with that. So we'll deconstruct a couple answers. And I'm not going to read the examples because they're very generic and much more to give you a sense of they're going to want you to take a position. They're going to want you to state something and then defend it. And so then keep these things in mind. This is how they're grading you. You must answer the question accurately. You analyze what each part of the question is asking you to do. It looks like they often have two parts to their questions. If the question asks you to describe or discuss, you should provide more than just a list. Answer the question completely. If a question asks you to do 3 distinct things in your response, you should cover all 3 things for your best score. Otherwise, no matter how well you write, you will not be awarded full credit. And I haven't talked about this very much, but I have been a reader for the College Board for 3 summers for the AP Literature exam. College Board and ETS are separate entities, but they partner because ETS is actually who paid me to be a reader. So I've been normed on a certain kind of constructed response, the AP Literature exam. And I know this to be true. We are not looking to evaluate your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation. If they get in the way of our readability, then that creates a challenge for us that would affect your score, but we're looking for your content of your answers. And I think that that's important for you to know, because I know many of us can feel kind of, especially with on-demand writing, uncomfortable about our spelling or grammar and worried about that. And not that it's nothing, but it's not the thing that your scorers are looking for. They're looking for the content, for the demonstration of knowledge about reading instruction. Do give a thorough and detailed response. You must demonstrate that you have a thorough understanding of the subject matter. However, your response should be straightforward and not filled with unnecessary information. So you're getting to the point, you're explaining why that's the thing that you think is the answer, and then you're maybe giving a little bit more information about how that's useful, and then you're done. They're not looking for a lot of fancy language. They're looking for clear explanation about what instructional strategies should be used and why. And then reread your response. If you have time, which hopefully you have a little bit of time, do check that you've written what you thought you wrote, right? Be sure not to leave sentences unfinished or omit clarifying information. And when we do deconstruct some of these answers, we can see that sometimes even just finishing up using the prompt's language in your sentence can make your explanation just that much more powerful because it's specific. And then finally, quick tip, you may find that it helps to take notes on scratch paper so that you don't miss any details. Then you'll be sure to have all the information you need to answer the question. And so then we'll be looking at more about this soon. Okay, so here's the categories again. This is my little pie chart of each of the categories that they ETS listed. So this is my construct, the pie chart, but all of the material, all of the language that follows is from the study guide itself, the ETS Praxis study guide. So we have phonemic awareness. And for phonemic awareness, and I'm going to speak my way through this. I know everybody can read. You can look back at this on your own, but there is a power to reading out loud for yourself and even just for hearing it. We all have multiple modalities in which we learn. We have different strengths, but we are listening and speaking creatures almost above everything else. So it's helpful to hear this. What you want to be thinking about is, what are the terms that are unfamiliar to me and to what degree, right? What do I need to look into more? What's fairly familiar and I'm fairly confident with, I'm not going to spend my study time on. So receptive and expressive components associated with oral language development. Identify cultural, environmental, and linguistic factors that may have an impact on literacy development. Instructional methods for teaching phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Syllables and onset and rhyme, R-I-M-E, rhyme. Phoneme segmenting, blending, deletion, and substitution. Recognize phonemic awareness difficulties across ages and grades. Instructional methods to teach beginning readers the concepts about print, such as directionality, return sweep, parts of a book, and the form and function of print. And instructional strategies to help emergent readers fluently identify letter names and sounds. And it's very compact, but we know, you've either been through these courses or you're going to be going through these courses. There's a lot that's going on in those few bullet points. In EDCI 241, you get that intro to linguistics. In your Ed Core classes, you're getting some introduction to developmental stages and milestones. And then in the literacy block and other courses, you're digging into reading and language development, teaching writing, into reading methodologies, reading adolescent literature, or children's literature, and then literacy assessment and intervention. All of our courses help build you towards a fuller understanding of all of these subcontents. If you haven't taken some or many of those courses, do reach out to myself and other literacy instructors to maybe ask for pointers of what resources you might look at in terms of the texts that we use, or other websites that might be helpful to dig into some of the nuances of some of this instruction. But as I said, I believe that Kathleen Jasper's introductions give us a lot, and ETS gives you a whole lot as well. Okay, and then phonics and decoding, right? Our next stage of literacy acquisition. For this one, you want to know or be familiar with the impact of decoding skills on literacy development across grade levels. Instructional methods for teaching phonics and decoding systematically, explicitly, and recursively across grade levels. Instructional methods for teaching common phonics patterns and rules, and this might include things like consonant digraphs, blends, diphthongs, schwa, the schwa sound, syllable types, word families, and so on. Instructional methods for teaching morphological analysis. Morphological, the morphology of words, is the affixes, the roots, the base words. Instructional methods for teaching syllable types when decoding multisyllabic words. What do we do? How do we teach students when the words get longer than single syllable words? And multisensory approaches for supporting student recognition of non-decodable, irregularly spelled words. Our sight words, right? Was, listen, though, the, once. All right, and then fluency and vocabulary. For fluency and vocabulary, you want to be familiar with and have some knowledge about instructional methods to foster students' fluency. How do we help them build their accuracy, their automaticity, their prosody, and their self-efficacy? And you're thinking to yourself as you're rehearsing, as you're looking at materials, what are the things that I have some comfort with? What are the words, the ideas that I haven't come across before, right? You want to highlight those things that you're like, I've got nothing, and pursue those a little bit. Many of the study books, the study guides will have nice, succinct introductions to what this is and what this means. Okay, and then methods of support. Fluent reading behaviors at the letter, name, sound, word, phrase, sentence, and passage level. I think I said support rather than supporting, which immediately threw off my sense making, right? Some methods of how do we support these fluent reading behaviors. Instructional methods to build, expand, and use expressive and receptive vocabulary systematically, explicitly, and through repeated exposures in multiple contexts. When you're listening to Kathleen Jasper's Good Words, Bad Words, because you're going to listen to that because it's one of the helpful things for thinking about test taking strategy in a specific way, notice the types of language that ETS uses again and again, right? 2 pages where I think the 2 in a row, we're seeing systematic instruction, explicit instruction, and repeated exposures in multiple contexts. You're seeing language that talks about multiple modalities. These are things then that when you see those in answers, you're going to think this might be the right answer. This might be what they want, right? And so then multiple approaches to teach word solving strategies using context clues and structural analysis, and matching an instructional method to word complexity, right? How complex is the word? What kind of method of instruction do I use then to help students be able to attack that appropriately and correctly? You should be able to know how to guide students to understand a wide variety of words through direct instruction. Common, contextual, content specific, connotation, multiple meaning words, right? How do you help students learn common words? How do you help them figure out the context and content specific words like domain specific, whether it's science or social studies or other specific areas? Multiple instructional methods for vocabulary instruction of second language learners. Cognates, those words that kind of seem like the same word and are. They have the same foundational meaning. Figurative language and idioms. And then how grammatical functions and punctuation affect fluency and the meaning of text. And then finally, how fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension are all interrelated. Okay, and then comprehension. And because this is a larger chunk, there are 3 slides of information that they want you to be familiar with in order to be able to demonstrate your understanding of how to teach students comprehension of literary and informational text. So you want to be able to support students' listening comprehension and how it relates to reading comprehension. Listening and reading are 2 sides of the same coin, right? Apply knowledge of child and adolescent development to the teaching of literary and informational texts. All right, so where they're at developmentally matters in terms of how you're instructing them. Differentiate instruction, tasks, and materials, print and digital, that are appropriate and culturally responsive to all learners. Use measures of text complexity to select appropriate texts for instruction and give students and guide students in self-selecting texts to increase motivation and engagement in literacy development. So what are the qualitative things that you look at to select good texts to match your child, your student? What are the quantitative measures that you consider in selecting appropriate texts? And how do you consider the reader and the task, the purpose for the reading? Use technology to support students' ability to critically examine online resources and know how to foster digital literacy to support active learning and research across content areas. And know how to integrate speaking and active listening skills into the reading process to scaffold understanding. How do you probe for their understanding? How do you initiate and support deep and meaningful discussions? How do you use questioning and your responses to support student learning and growth? And then activate and scaffold students' background knowledge to increase comprehension and how students' experiences influence the way they interpret a text. And then use various approaches to develop comprehension skills from simple to complex, whether it's retelling, summarizing, understanding the thesis, and also complex arguments. Direct students to draw inferences from texts and to cite relevant textual evidence to support comprehension and text analysis. And then strategies for supporting readers as they construct literal and inferential meaning, including authors' use of language and rhetoric, which is really kind of the same thing. Use of language and the rhetoric are an interrelated idea. Role of language structures of text, such as sentence, phrase, or paragraph in comprehension, right? So how do different language structures, how's the organization of material at the sentence level, at the phrase level, at the paragraph level, help or hinder comprehension? And then methods for teaching students to understand authors' word choices, their format and style, the text structure, and visual representations to create a desired effect. What is the meaning of the text, the tone, the mood, etc. And then last one for comprehension. Know how to model metacognitive strategies that support students to self-monitor their understanding of text. How do we help them analyze and synthesize and evaluate information and be aware of their process so that this is a portable, transferable skill that they can use from day to day, week to week, class to class, year to year? And teach the use of graphic and semantic organizers to support comprehension. Graphic organizers and semantic organizers. Teach the recognition and understanding of literary and informational text, including genre, text structure, and text features. So literary texts might be poetry or prose or drama, biographies, how-tos. The genre of text might be the story elements, description, cause and effect, and then text features are things like text boxes, graphs, technical language, what kind of technical language, that sort of thing. How to teach the recognition and understanding of literary devices. And so literary devices might be things like figurative language, connotation, the nuance of words, rhetoric, appositives, and alliteration. And then finally, know some ways to demonstrate how source material can be represented in multiple mediums and can have more than one interpretation or one version. Okay. And then writing. And so the writing part, also a couple pages here, know how to teach that teaching writing is a recursive process that supports self-evaluation, expression, analysis, and inquiry, right? We don't just write, writing has purposes to it. Know systematic, explicit, and responsive instructional methods to build students' understanding and use of the writing process. Know instructional methods for integrating reading and writing in varied contexts and across grade levels and disciplinary domains. And instructional methods to support writing development for English learners. Instructional methods to support students' use of multiple print and digital tools for communication, collaboration, research, and all steps of the writing process. And then also know the defining characteristics, purpose, appropriate audience, and instructional methods for teaching the types of writing. And by types of writing, we're looking at the main, probably the main Common Core State Standard writing types, which are narrative, are informational, and are argumentative texts. And then instructional methods to develop students' skills in selecting and using credible and accurate sources, as well as instructional methods to teach the quoting and proper citation of textual evidence in the writing process, and be able to model the author's use of craft for effect to develop written language across grade levels. Be able to use mentor texts to motivate and support students throughout the writing process. Model editing and revising to refine a piece of writing, and the methods to connect the teaching of both decoding and encoding as reciprocal skills. How do we break down words and how do we write the words, decoding and encoding? And those are interrelated tasks. Take a systematic, explicit, multisensory, recursive approach to spelling development. And then finally, instructional methods for teaching the structure of written language, including conventions of grammar and mechanics, such as parallel structure, phrases, clauses, punctuation. And then included in all the categories, there will be questions related to any of these previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories that have to do with assessment, right? Because that's something that we're always doing in a variety of ways. And so we want to think about being able to monitor student progress by analyzing and interpreting formative assessment data in order to inform our instruction. Use data to differentiate instruction for the whole class, for groups, and for individuals. Embed and apply informal and formal methods for assessing all essential elements of literacy instruction. Formal and informal methods include formative and summative evaluations, and making decisions that lead to the modification or accommodation of instruction based on assessments to meet the needs of diverse learners. Diverse needs of learners include our gifted our English learners, our struggling readers and writers, our culturally diverse learners, and students with learning disabilities, right? There's a lot of ways that you think about diversity in your classroom, and there'll be questions that ask things around this. And then finally, ways to integrate digital tools into the assessment process. Okay, I'm going to pause just for a moment. Does anybody have any questions about, especially again, if you've taken this before, or if you're just kind of processing some of these categories, because we're going to move into constructed response next, so it's a little bit different. What questions might you have right now? Okay.
Well, you're rehydrating,
right?
and giving your throat a break. I'll just jump in to introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Boyson-Taylor. I'm faculty in curriculum and instruction, and I'm also the director of field placement, which means that when you get to the point where you're being placed in practicums, if you're in the Moscow area, you'll be working with me, or if you're in Northern Idaho, you might be working with Kirsten to be placed in your practicums. And then we have a placement coordinator, Dr. Rodney McConnell, who's down in the Boise area. I also occasionally do some out-of-state placements for unique situations, but I also have a finger on the pulse of all of our student teaching placements. And so while we do have in Northern Idaho a placement coordinator for student teaching and one in Southern Idaho, if you're in the Moscow area or out of state, I'm the person that will be interviewing you. And I'm also providing the guidance for what needs to happen in order for you to be placed wherever you are. So one thing that I just want to point out that was mentioned in the last Praxis session that Kirsten designed and created is that we want you to have the maximum time, thoughtfulness, and intentionality around getting Praxis done. And there's a couple weird things about Praxis. The first is that you really do, it takes a couple weeks to get scores. Some of them will give unofficial scores right away, but not all of the Praxis tests. And so we want to make sure that if you're planning on student teaching, let's say next spring, that by the beginning of the semester before that you have scheduled and taken your Praxis. Which means that when you apply to student teach one whole year in advance, you should also be scheduling your Praxis tests. It doesn't mean you're taking them all at once right away, but it means that you have the goal to finish them up before the semester before you student teach, before the first day of that semester. Because about a month into that semester, you're going to interview to student teach, and we'll need your scores, because we need you to pass Praxis in order to be placed. That's a requirement that many schools place upon us, and we don't want you going into your student teaching experience still having to worry about Praxis, because it's not only a graduation requirement, it is a certification requirement. And if for any reason you need to retake a Praxis, there has to be 28 days in between the first time that you take it and the second time. And so you can see how if you wait till the last minute, you just won't have enough of a buffer to be able to manage those things well. And the only other thing I'll say is right now we're, coming out of having a lot of the Praxis tests fully online. We're figuring out, ETS is figuring out where to offer them in person, but there are a few Praxis tests, including foreign language tests, that are only offered every 3 months. And that can make it really hard if you haven't been looking way ahead to know when you need to schedule those things. So the reason that we want to talk about Praxis early and often is that we want you to feel unhurried. We want you to feel as though if it doesn't go the way that you want it to on the first attempt, that's okay. You have time to regroup and get after it again. So if you have specific questions related to that, and you feel like you want to reach out to me to discuss those things, I'm happy to either answer your questions if I know the answer. My email is just Rebecca, REBEKKA, at uidaho.edu. Or I can get you in touch with the right person to help you so that we can just lower any anxiety and support you, give you all the information that you need so that you'll be successful. Okay. Are you hydrated and ready to?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was really my ploy was, oh, if people ask questions and I can take a breath. So thank you. Yeah. And thank you so much, Rebecca, for your support and collaboration in this whole process. You guys will find that if you are brave and bold enough to reach out and ask questions of any of your faculty advisors, we will help you through this. We will, like Rebecca said, if we don't individually have the answer, we will connect you with somebody else or make those connections to help you out. So make sure to ask those questions that you have, because we want to help you get through this successfully and well. Okay. So I see there was a chat comment set. Okay. Just to me. Okay. So constructed response. Okay. So we're looking at a couple different categories of questions that they're going to ask. And those of you that have taken this or a similar exam have seen probably some of these. If you're in the elementary education program, you are still going to have, because this is a secondary, a K through 12 certification, you're going to get secondary questions as well as elementary questions, and definitely also questions about a variety of diverse learners, right? How do we teach for all of our students and all of the different ways? You can see that I linked again to the Kathleen Jasper YouTube on the Praxis teaching reading exam, the constructed response. Do listen to her videos. I think that she is masterful and clear and will help with some of the specific things that I'm giving kind of this overview. She's going to help dive in a little bit, and then reach out to your content specialist teachers too, to ask more questions if you're like, I don't really understand this aspect of like writing instruction. And we love to talk about our content. So we'd love to support you in resources or thinking or dialogue, whatever it is that might help you dig in. So in the study guide, or I think that's what it's called, they have buried deep kind of in the middle of the guide. So if you've printed this out or if you have PDFs of this, they have this small section that's a page or two long that is they call it the discussion areas. And these are the things that they are basing their questions on. So you can see that they're phrased as a question, but this doesn't look like the fullness of a scenario and a prompt that they'll give. But this gives you opportunity. If I were you and preparing for this as a student, I would probably try to write out, this is where I would bullet point or list terms or strategies for each of these questions. And you can see that they've broken it down just like in the test areas of phonological and phonemic awareness, including emergent literacy. And they ask a few questions, right? Things like, what are some instructional strategies for teaching letter recognition, right? This is a great opportunity to go back to my homework, to my work from other classes that I've done, or to other study guides and say, how do we do this? How do we teach letter recognition? Right? What are the strategies that we might use? And then phonics and decoding, the same thing, several, not super hyper specific, right? We're not at scenarios. We're not at something that really gives you a chance to practice an answer. Instead, this is a chance to kind of do some terminology dump a little bit, to pull those notes together in some sort of way. I'm a fairly linear and word heavy person. So I might actually take this and make this a Word document and add my stuff, maybe in a different color, because that's about as creative as I am, of like my answers to these, and recognize where I need to do some more homework to fill in some of these ideas. Other folks might do, you know, a visual, what are those called, with the bubbles and the connected bubbles for ideas. You know, so you might take notes in some different ways, but I would say that this is an opportunity to run through the concepts, the topics, and think about where your gaps are, and use this as a launching point for thinking about the constructed response. And again, if your time is short, right, if you're looking at taking this very soon, which I know a couple of you are, obviously you're not going to extensively do all of that writing, but you might look for doing some. I think doing the writing is helpful, though, just like a word or two on the edge of the paper, just to feel like you know what you know, right, and that you've got this, and then you can like pursue the things that you're like, I'm not so sure about. So yes,
Looking
Rebecca.
at these questions, it's just making me think, like, what a great study for two people to go back and forth asking each other the questions with really brief answers. You know, I can see if you're a person that likes to collaborate, finding a study buddy of some sort and using them that way too.
Yeah,
This is great.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that I hope to develop. Rebecca and I have talked about this, that having a community, a study community, is part of what I think community is always valuable, because we learn more, we grow more together, but with the shared goal of trying to build your knowledge in talking with somebody else. There's so much that you can do. So if you are interested in finding a study buddy, reach out to us and we will help to matchmake. I'd like to have a system in place. We don't have one right now, but right now, just if we can kind of help make those connections. So if we know some students are like, yes, I'd love to work with somebody, I just don't know who I might work with, then we can kind of like help make those connections a little bit. Does that sound good, Rebecca? Yeah. And okay, so, and I'm not going to read through all of these because I've read through a lot of stuff, and you can go back and look at these. But what I do want to do is we have some sample test items and explanations. You can see I'm dipping into the constructed response a few times, right? And then we'll dip into it more. I have some sample test items and explanations that we're going to look at a couple of these. This is, again, directly from the Praxis study guide, right? So this is their questions from their materials. I've just put them on slides. So their first question: as part of a reading class, a teacher requires students to keep a response journal for the texts they have read. The teacher's purpose in having the students write their response is that writing can A, help students increase their reading fluency, B, make students keep track of the books they read and share them, C, help students discover more of what they think and feel about a text, D, focus students' attention on facts and eliminate feelings. So when we look at this question, when I look at this question as a test taker, I'm looking for, okay, so it's keeping a response journal for texts that they're reading, and why are they doing this? I'm seeing A, to help increase fluency, B, to keep track of books, basically to keep a log, C, to help students discover more of what they think and feel, and D, to focus their attentions on facts and eliminate feelings. Thinking about good words, bad words, do any of these seem like questions that you could, answers that you could eliminate, that seem like they're probably not the right answer? My intuition says, and I'm not a super expert in taking this test, but I did just run through this and I've run through these. My intuition says that making students keep track doesn't sound like it's really helpful in terms of having students learn something, right? And we're looking at learning, right? They're keeping a response journal for the text they've read. Yes, it will help them keep track, but that make students is worrisome to me, because as teachers, when we say make, that's implying a relationship with our students that we don't usually talk about as what we're wanting to cultivate in the classroom, right? Taking notes on what they've read doesn't have a lot to do with increasing fluency. And so just through my own think aloud right here, I'm leaning away from B, I'm leaning away from A, and this eliminate feelings in D is a worrisome phrase, right? That in and of itself, and then focus students' attentions on facts when they're keeping a response journal for the text that they've read. So I'm leaning towards C, based on just kind of the type of language that they're using in a couple of these questions. I'm a little concerned about fluency because I'm not sure if this helps with fluency, but feeling like help them increase their reading fluency is a little bit off the mark. I'm thinking it's C. Let's see if I'm right. Okay. You're right. No, I did just review these, but there's always a chance. I am not 100% on these, right? I teach this. I know a lot. I've taught English for years. I do not score 100%, right? And I want to say that in all humility, but also to help you guys recognize that these are not the kind of tests that we're looking for 100%. Of course, we want to be perfect, but we're all subject to certain kinds of narrowness, certain kinds of tunnel vision, and certain kinds of things that I can get tricked by. And I have some patterns of things that will trick me. Response journals are an opportunity for connecting their lives to the text, right? And also deepening their understanding. So it wasn't fluency, right? Fluency would be a different kind of task that really wouldn't be our journaling. There would be other things we'd be doing, like having conversation, reading out loud, things where we're practicing text over time. Okay, students have been assigned the task of evaluating character motivations in order to ascribe personality traits to the characters in a text they are reading. Which of the following activities would be most effective in achieving this goal? Now, I tell you guys, when I'm reading this out loud, it's very hard for me to comprehend as I'm reading out loud. And as I'm talking and you're reading, that can also make it hard to comprehend. As a test taker, I've got my pencil out, I'm circling, I'm interacting with the text, one, because I get distracted easy, but two, I'm looking for what are the anchor words? What are the words that I need to remember when I'm going between the question and the answer? I take a lot of notes. If I'm able to, I sub-vocalize. I read as much out loud as I can, because when I hear myself say the words, even just mouthing them to myself, sometimes it helps me comprehend better and more quickly. Okay, so evaluating character motivations in order to give personality traits to the characters in the texts that they're reading. So which of the following activities? A, teaching readers to track key events in the text and make inferences to enhance understanding. B, having students perform a timed read of the same passage multiple times to monitor fluency. C, requiring students to recognize specific text organization and style used by the author. And D, allowing readers to create storyboards using the main events in chronological order. It's a lot of words on these answers, right?
For me, there's always two questions that seem like really good answers, and then it's just kind of a 50-50 choice.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I feel like it's almost a personal choice, but they have it down to where it's not a personal choice of what you would do in your own classroom. And that's what makes it so difficult.
Right, right. And they really do intend one to be at least slightly stand out better. And that is really hard. And Christine, I'm with you. I have at least one of these just in this small sample of 18 that I just disagree with. And I might have that even in the slide notes because I needed to note it someplace. Like, I don't think this is right. And then as a test taker, I have to recognize that might be a consistent bias that I have. Like, I might get tricked by that type of question again and again for exactly that reason. Yeah. For this one, do you have an intuition? Do you have two that you're looking at?
Well, for me, because I also like little kids or work with little kids, I really like D for using the storyboards because it's a hands-on activity. So I'm not going to lose my kids by like making them highlight with A. Which I would do with like fourth, fifth, sixth graders could do that.
Right, right. Yeah.
So,
And so then for yourself, as you're reading and you're thinking about the best answer, you're also thinking, am I biasing myself towards my 5-year-olds, or am I thinking about like, could this work for a wider range of students? Right. So it's a lot of metacognition, but probably a piece that you're going to want to test yourself on before you say, yes, this is the answer.
Yeah. So I'm just not totally sure. I could be totally wrong with A or D, but that's the ones that I'm leaning towards.
Yeah. Good.
Just
Okay.
because
Yeah.
requiring seems like, oh, that's tough for me. And then like having students perform over and over multiple times of fluency doesn't seem like what we're doing at all.
Right. Right.
We're focusing on something else. So
Yeah.
making inferences stands out to me, and then doing chronological order seems okay, but I would probably go with A just for making inferences to enhance the understanding of the story characters.
Yeah. And let's see. It is, look at that. The correct answer is A, tracking key events and making inferences. And I think this is the one that I actually lean towards C because I want them to be doing something with the text structure. And that's a bias that I have to kind of get past, similar to your storyboards, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for adding that, Christine, because I think it's important to be kind of processing without getting like too caught up in like, oh no, I always guess the wrong one. Look for those patterns of what is it that's like making the wrong one and the slightly wrong one, right? Because like you're able to eliminate and then you're at those two and you're like, oh, this one seems like the one that matches like what I envision for the students I'll be working with and the modalities that I really want to be teaching. But does that get in the way of what's the best answer here?
Okay, so like one thing to importantly note, it's just because this is a K through 12 and not just my elementary test, is to look at how can I apply this to multiple grades kind of deal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they're looking for, more or less. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Because unless they're specifying, this could be 9th graders or it could be 2nd graders. Now, obviously, we can kind of like, if we're talking about aims to boost English learners' knowledge of new vocabulary by teaching them how to look at cognates, if we're using the term cognate with our class, we're probably working with a slightly older group of students, right? So sometimes we are looking for some explicit text evidence for what grade band, because they sometimes do say in a high school classroom, but otherwise do kind of take that bigger lens of across all the grades, does this work? And they probably don't usually mean like, an 18-year-old and a 5-year-old simultaneously as they're writing it, but watch that, because that does sound like that might be something that might catch you up.
I'm pretty sure it has. So
yeah, good. Okay. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, because I said this would take about an hour and I'm at about an hour, I'm not going to walk through all of these, but you can quiz yourself on them because it's kind of, you could just go from slide to slide and check to see. But what I want to do for you guys.
Could you also re-email out the PowerPoint for this?
I will, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to do at least one, maybe 2 more blasts out to my whole email list. And then I've got to figure out a way to not catch folks that don't want to be hearing from me. So yeah, I will do the follow-up from this as well as the invite to the next session, which will be in 2 more weeks, looking at the multiple subject exam, kind of in the same like broad overview way with some sample questions. Okay, So our constructed response questions. The Teaching Reading K-12 test consists of 3 constructed response questions that require the candidate to demonstrate the ability to apply knowledge and theory of reading to specific students' needs and classroom scenarios, right? So this is when they really do kind of start to narrow it down for us, where we really are looking at high school students or this group of English language learners or whatever it is. Their general scoring guide, right? They don't make it a mystery, although it can still feel like a mystery when you're looking at this and looking at your own writing and wondering, how does my writing match up to these, right? But I'm just going to read out the 3, right? Our top scores for this is a score of 3. The response demonstrates a thorough understanding of the elements of reading and reading instruction relevant to the question. A response in this category clearly and specifically answers all parts of the question in a way that directly addresses the instructional situation described, right? So you're getting to the point clearly and specifically and hitting all the parts of the question. That means when we look at the next one, I'm taking notes as well there, right? Like part 1, part 2. These are the things that they need me to answer so that I can remember what I'm answering. Shows strong knowledge of concepts, theories, facts, procedures, or methodologies relevant to the question. Any errors of fact or terminology are minor and do not detract from the thorough understanding that is shown, and provides supporting evidence and rationales, right? So what backs up your claim and why is this a good thing for us to do with these students? So our example, so here's our structure. And I taught this at the high school level as Ray says, and I would always make sure to say it like that because my 9th graders would hear me say it differently. But I like this even better, racer, because it doesn't even get me there. So you restate the question, right? So you're rewriting the prompt. Answer all the parts in that first restate. Right, so that's your first sentence. You're restating the question as an answer and you're giving your thesis right away, right? This isn't fancy long paragraph answers. These are pretty quick and to the point. Cite evidence from the text, because this kind of applies and it kind of doesn't, right? We're usually using this in a slightly different way, but this works for us to think about this. So you're restating the question, you're answering all the parts. Sentence 1. What's the evidence? Tell us about the specific thing. E is extend and make connections. That's for the language that they used. That's the supporting evidence and the rationales. Why is this a good answer? Why is this a good idea? A sentence or 2. And then restate your opening and wrap it up. You're going to come back to, this is good for students. These activities are good for students in this context that they described. And we're going to look at a couple examples. So you'll write about a paragraph for each question or part of the prompt, about a paragraph, and a short paragraph, not a literary paragraph, but a short and succinct paragraph. Make sure that each part has at least one specific example that you elaborate on. Okay, so our scenario here is, and so it says, read the scenario and respond to all parts of the task. Suggested time, 10 minutes. Here's our scenario. A high school English language arts teacher decides to further the students' development as readers by using authentic literacy materials that include a technology component in their instruction. Okay, so we're high school language arts, and we're looking at authentic literacy and technology. Looks like there's 2 parts. Let's see. The task says, be sure to respond to both of the following. Using the information provided in the scenario, do the following things. And sure enough, there's 2 things. Describe one authentic literacy material that the teacher could use to support the students' development as readers. All right, provide a rationale for why the selection of this material would support the objective. and then briefly describe one example of how the teacher can integrate technology to support this focus on reading. So you're thinking about, okay, what is authentic literacy material, right? So you're kind of racking your brain, what is authentic literacy material? And then what is one way that you can use technology to support this focus on reading? So our 3-point answer. So I said short paragraph. It varies a teeny bit how long they seem to be, but this side, this left-hand side, is the whole answer. Okay, so one paragraph answers the authentic literacy material, and they say it right away, right? They're not like doing any kind of fancy hook. They're not doing anything else. They say one authentic literacy material teachers could use to support students' development as readers is by using trade books. So they've restated the question, the prompt, and they've given their answer, trade books. And then they explain why trade books is a good idea. Incorporating trade books over various genres, ability levels, and formats will help students become more proficient readers. So trade books are good for students and lots of students because, and then it says trade books are reading, so then it explains what they are. Trade books are reading materials from the students' everyday lives and include maps, biographies, fiction, poetry, historical fiction, and graphic novels, amongst others. Did they need to say all those things? Not necessarily, but this student is demonstrating that they understand that trade books are authentic literacy materials, that they're helpful because they can be varied across lots of different students, right? So they address diverse students' needs. And here are some examples. And then finally, they say students can choose what to read based on their ability, interest, and or readiness. So this is a thorough, succinct, maybe a little too lengthy in the examples, but that nails it for the grader. The evaluator knows that you know what you're talking about. This is what trade books offer to students. And then when students can choose books based on a variety of criteria, their interest and motivation increases. I think that should be part of, that paragraph, right? And then we have the next paragraph, the next part of the question. Students can have abundant opportunities to read texts at their instructional levels over topics of high interest, which helps develop students' reading development and abilities. One technology component teachers can integrate to support this focus on reading is by using web quests, right? Their sentences that they're using are very straightforward sentences, right? They're taking the prompt, restating the prompt, and then giving one example. And then right away, they say web quests are a great way to expose students to a variety of topics and text formats, right? So what's the answer? What's your answer? What is that for, right? Like, why is that a good answer? And then tell us some more about it. Students can visit multiple websites about specific content area subjects, learn more about authors, or read a variety of informational texts, amongst others. Web quests are a great way to expose students to a variety of authentic materials while developing their reading skills, right? So they're starting to wrap it up, right? This is our concluding sentences already. Embedded in these web quests are questions or activities students need to complete. When students read materials with a purpose in their mind, their reading development increases. So this is two, not super lengthy, but the second one gets a little lengthy, right? And I'm not quite sure actually with my cut and paste, because I took this from the book. As I'm looking at these paragraphs, I'm not, if this was polished writing, I would have some writerly questions about why this is 3 paragraphs, right? But what I can see as a grader is I can see that there's this first chunk that it kind of continues, right? And it kind of continues into this next paragraph. And then right here at one technology component is where now there's the second question being answered. So even though the structure is a rough draft structure, I can see the sense in it. I know that the student knows exactly what they're talking about, that they have a specific example, and they're able to back up how that would support students, right? They're not claiming this is the only way. They're just saying this is one way, and they explain it thoroughly. Okay. Any off the top of your heads questions that you want to ask about this structure? As we're recording for posterity's sake, I know I'm asking a lot of you guys, so you do not have to offer up a question right now.
One is just, where do we find our previous scores for the written exam? Or are they just incorporated in?
I think they're incorporated in, because I look at those scores and I look at you guys' breakdowns when they come in, and I don't recall seeing the constructed response as a separate score.
Okay.
But I'll go back and look, Christine, and I'll let you know. But are you able to see a breakdown of your score based on like the phonemic awareness and the informational text, or the?
Yeah, I can send you a screenshot of what it looks like for us.
Yeah.
If it's helpful.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be helpful, because yeah, it might be that they're identical, or it might be that chances are I don't know something that you don't know, as far as that breakdown goes. But send it to me so we can kind of see, because I'm learning this better. Yeah. Okay. And then just really quickly, and I'm not going to read through this, what you can see on the side from the first one was I felt pretty confident about where I was breaking down kind of like the logical progression of, they restated the answer, they cited an example, they gave further explanation, and then they kind of were wrapping it up, right? That was pretty easy for me to see the flow of their logic. The one that received a score of a 2, I was having a hard time getting all of that the same way, right? So just that organizational structure of remembering that you're restating the question, you're giving a simple answer, right? One word or a couple words, you're explaining that answer, and then you're providing more explanation, more of a rationale, and then you're wrapping it back up, bringing it back to why that's a good example. Is such a clean way to organize this. You might have 3 to 5 sentences for each part of the question. And that's all I have for you guys. I have a couple more examples of the constructed response from a couple different types of tests, because they are kind of similar and give you a couple different prompts that are exactly the language that the ETS uses in their various praxis exams, which is going to be the purest place to be looking for, how do I prepare? Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop recording so that we can have kind of a little bit, maybe more of a discussion for whoever is able to still be here. I want to stop sharing, but it's not stop sharing. It's stop recording. Thank you all, those of you that are listening to this. If you've made it this far, I hope that this has been helpful, and do reach out to us with more questions, and breathe deep. You've got this. You're going to make it through. Okay, stop. My cursor is vanishing on me as I'm